I think they would have helped me anyway because they would have just assumed I was Dutch, right? I'm a really tall guy, and they just would have figured he's Dutch. People, every time I end up on KLM on my way through to the Middle East, when I get on the KLM plane, people just start talking Dutch to me. And I'm like, I don't know what to say now. And then they speak English, so then it all works out after that. So what does heroism have to do with being a freak? I think heroes are freaks. Heroes stick out when everybody else tries to fit in. Heroes see strength where everyone else sees weakness. So my thesis today is really simple. It's that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. I know a little bit about being different, although it's not as different when I'm here in the Netherlands, but I'm really tall, and I've always stuck out. The first question people ask me when they meet me is, how tall are you? The answer to that is I'm 2 meters, but I'm 2'10" in heels. And I've been married to my wife for 20 years. I am 2 meters tall. She is 1.5. If you wonder how that works, just realize that in our relationship, deodorant is much more important than breath mints. It takes some people a little longer on that one. So I've always been different, but I wished I wasn't, because we live in a world that tells us that what makes us weird makes us awful, and what makes us weak makes us wrong. What I always wanted more than anything else was to be normal, to fit in, to be like everyone else, because I thought that's what the good people did. Robert Quinn says in his book, Deep Change, that deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. If you perform beyond the norms, the systems will adjust and try to make you normal. We say we want heroes, but as soon as people start acting in an unusual way, which is what's required of heroes, we start asking them to be more normal. Deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. We want more heroes, but we don't want more freaks. But if we want more heroes, we need more freaks. One of the reasons that we don't like people who are different is because we see different as wrong. We have something psychologists call negativity bias. We tend to see what's wrong instead of what's right in any given situation, even if what's wrong is really, really small and what's right is really, really big. Imagine I had a stain on my shirt. Negativity bias says everybody in the room would be staring at that stain. Some of you would be unable to pay attention to anything I was saying because you'd be thinking about how we could work on that stain later. What it also says, though, is that nobody in this room, no matter how positive and encouraging you think you are, would be looking at that stain and thinking to themselves, that Dave Rendall's doing a good job. Because 98% of that shirt is stain-free. Nice job, Dave, nice job. And yet that's a measurable scientific reality. And if you were asked to rate my appearance at the end of this presentation and I had a big stain on my shirt, some of you would not only give me a failing score, you'd give me a 0 because we shouldn't have stains on our shirt. And we walk through this world and we see the problems and we miss the good. Remember what Suzanne told us? We see the problem, we don't see the heroes doing something about it. We see what's wrong instead of what's right, and we see what's wrong in other people instead of seeing what's right. When I was a kid, I was always in trouble for 3 things. People always saw wrong in me. I was in trouble because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told at school. Teachers called me obnoxious, rebellious, inappropriate, immature, told me I had no self-discipline and no self-control. And if I didn't fix those things, I was going to end up homeless and living in a van down by the river. Sooner or later, they'd kick me out of the class and they'd send me to the principal's office. I remember I was in 3rd grade, so I was 8 years old. I got sent to the principal's office. He sat me down on his lap, which seems questionable now looking back on it. And he told me there's 3 kinds of bad people in this world. There's bad people, there's really bad people, and there's people who are too far gone. I was like, wow, this story doesn't even have good people in it. He told me I was a really bad kid on the verge of being too far gone. He told me, Dave, you need to learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what you're told if you ever want to be successful in this life. And I'm not the only person that happened to. Ken Robinson said many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. They were highly talented, brilliant, and creative. Yet when they were at school, people told them that the best thing about them was the worst thing about them. They told them that their strengths, they either denied or ignored them, or they stigmatized them. They told them that their biggest strengths were their biggest weaknesses. Like Matt said, I have a pretty crazy travel schedule. I get paid to do 3 things. I get paid to stand up, not to sit down. I get paid to talk, not to be quiet. And I get paid to run my own business, not to do what other people tell me to do. In April, I'll do 21 presentations in 14 cities in 7 different countries. I don't kind of do a little bit of speaking. I went professional. I went pro at the very thing that people spent their entire life trying to stop me from doing. Once I discovered that my biggest weakness was also my biggest strength, and I started tapping into it instead of trying to fix it and avoid it, I found tremendous success, and I wondered if that might be true for other people. I wonder if other people might have weaknesses that were also strengths, and I found that they definitely do. And so I want to show you that connection between strength and weakness today. So as I said, I spend a lot of time on airplanes, and I'm too big for most airplanes. And so when I go to get on the airplane, the flight attendant always looks at me and says, "Sir, you need to watch your head," which is hard to do if you've ever tried. And I get in on the airplane like this, and you're like, "Hey, Dave, whatever, we've ducked before." But you're used to re-emerging on the other side, right? I don't get to re-emerge. That's just all the bigger the plane is, and I get to my seat. But maybe I got an upgrade. Maybe I'm in an exit row. But sooner or later, I have to go to the bathroom. And if you don't fit in the middle of the plane, you certainly don't fit on the side of the plane where they jam these bathrooms. And some people have accused me of exaggerating this next part, so I took the liberty of an airplane bathroom selfie. And so what happens is I get into the airplane bathroom and I close the door behind me. I can't turn around to do it, so we hope it's latched. We don't know until someone tries for a visit. And I'm here, but the toilet is over there, and I have things that need to go in the toilet. And so I try to move closer, but the ceiling goes like this. And so as I try to move closer, it just pushes my head closer and closer and closer to the toilet, and that's not what I'm looking for. So I've developed something I call the limbo yoga approach. I press my face into the side of the airplane, and then I try to match my upper body to the shape, that rounded shape of the side of the airplane, and I move the lower body in and I rotate. But the problem is there's not a lot of visual information now about what's about to happen, so I decided to use the mirror, right? Maybe I can triangulate what's happening here and kind of get, like GPS uses that kind of a system, right? And as I was looking in the mirror one time, I realized, wait a second, there's a sink right there. That is a whole lot higher and a whole lot closer. That seems custom designed for what needs to happen here. See, we live in a world where it's good to be tall. We pay taller people more. We think tall people are smarter. We vote for taller people in elections. It's really advantageous to be tall in some situations. It's really disadvantageous in other situations. But I don't get to accept the advantages of my height without also accepting what? The disadvantages of my height. And once we understand that all characteristics are like that, is it good or bad to be tall? The answer is yes. We have neutral characteristics that we can choose to see as strengths or weaknesses, but the reality is they're a little bit of both. Peter Drucker said it this way. He said, strong people always have strong weaknesses too, where there are peaks, there are valleys. We're uncomfortable with that, though. We want people to be good at everything. We want people who are good across the board. We want peaks all the way across. That's not the reality. That's not how things work. A good way to think about this is that everybody has side effects. There's no such thing as a medicine without side effects, and there's no such thing as people without side effects. And oftentimes, the stronger the medicine, the stronger the side effects, and the only way to reduce the side effect of a medicine is to reduce the benefit and the dosage of that medicine, and that's what we do when we try to fix people. We try to fix their weaknesses, and we end up destroying their strengths in the process. George Eliot said, every limit is a beginning as well as an ending, so I want to give you an example of the beginnings that come with obvious limits that we have. We know that dyslexia is a limitation that people have. We heard somebody talking about that earlier, and you mix up your letters, and so you mix up your words, and so you struggle to read, and you struggle to write, so you struggle in school, and then that means you'll struggle in life, or at least that's what we've been taught. But they were studying millionaires in the United Kingdom and discovered that 50% of the millionaires in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. They were doing a study of entrepreneurs in the United States and discovered that only 33% of the entrepreneurs in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of the people in the general population have dyslexia. This is Ingvar Kamprad. He's the billionaire founder of IKEA. He's doing just fine. He has dyslexia. Richard Branson is the billionaire founder of the Virgin series of companies. He has dyslexia. But some people think, well, maybe Richard Branson's not as excited about having dyslexia as you are. Right? But they actually asked him that exact question, how has dyslexia affected your success? And he said, strangely, I think my dyslexia has helped. I didn't overcome it and become better. It actually makes me better, and we'll get to how it does that in a second. Paul Orfila is another person who got kicked out of 4 different high schools because he was so dyslexic. Then he got fired from 4 family-owned businesses that he tried to work at. His own parents fired him from businesses they owned, and they didn't want to work with him. So he started his own business. It was called Kinko's, and he recently sold it to FedEx for $2.4 billion. And he said this, he said, I think everyone should have dyslexia. He recognizes the peak so distinctly that if you offered to fill in the valley for him, he would turn you down. He's not looking for a cure because he understands what scientists are starting to understand, which is dyslexia isn't a broken brain, it's a different brain. And the very brain that causes dyslexic people to struggle at school causes them to succeed in life at a higher level than most of the rest of us ever will. It looks like a weakness, but it's also a strength. A few years ago, I ran a 65-kilometer race. And when I finished, my brother-in-law told me I was crazy and awesome. And I think if we want to be awesome, we have to be willing to be a little bit more crazy. Seneca said there's no great genius without a touch of madness. And the problem is because of negativity bias, we live in a world that when you express genius, people only see madness. What makes us weird makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. But we need to know where we fit. We need to know how to deploy this. When I was a kid, I got a job delivering newspapers because we were poor and I wanted to make some money, but I fell off my bike delivering the newspapers and I broke my arm in half. And my arm came up at a 90-degree angle to the rest of my forearm. And they took me to the hospital and they didn't want to do surgery, so they put me in a cast after putting me in traction and they sent me home for 3 months. And they took my arm out after 3 months and they told me I was okay, and I thought I was okay until 8 years later. I was in college and I was trying to play the guitar and I couldn't. Because I couldn't turn my hand over the way you're supposed to. I can't turn my left hand flat like you would need to play the guitar. And that's when I realized why I struggled at the drive-thru for so many years. I thought everybody struggled at the drive-thru. There was a bad system for conducting business. Because I can give them the money just fine, that's no problem, but when they try to give me the change, it's like, ah! And they're like, sir, just turn your hand over. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, no, but you also have to reach it out. My sister-in-law had a great idea. She said I should get a basket on a stick and just reach it in there. But then I went to Australia, and in Australia they drive on the left-hand side of the road, so they drive on the right-hand side of the car. The first place I went was to McDonald's. And when I reached my right hand out, everything worked fine. I wasn't better, but I was more successful because I changed where I was instead of trying to change who I was. Weaknesses are oftentimes situationally defined. And what we say is, things aren't working, so I need to change. And what I'm telling you is things aren't working. Sometimes we need to change where we are, not who we are. Thorkild Sohn understood the way this works. He runs a company in Denmark called Specialister, and they hire people with autism on purpose, not as a government program, as a business, and they do software testing. Software testing requires two things of people. It requires hyperfocus and the ability to do the same thing over and over again. Two of the symptoms of autism are hyperfocus and doing the same thing over and over again. He takes people who are seen as disabled by the rest of the world and gives them a competitive advantage inside of his firm because they are better because of their apparent disability. We've all seen this before. We have some folks from Italy right up there. Right? The Leaning Tower of Pisa. What's wrong with the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It's leaning. But it's been like that for 843 years. And in the 1930s, Mussolini decided this was a bad representation of his country, that this was a scar on the reputation of Italy, and he actually ordered his government engineers to straighten it up. We live in a world that loves to straighten things up and straighten things out. His engineers tried and they failed, and that was a really lucky thing for the city of Pisa. Because millions of people have traveled millions of kilometers and spent millions of euros to see what? A tower that leans. And the people who run the tower now understand that. They say because of its inclination, the tower has become the object of very special attention. That's what I'm telling you. It's because of your inclination that your life, your work, will become the object of very special attention. But the problem is we live in a world that doesn't like you to be inclined. It doesn't like you to be crooked. It wants to straighten you up. The people who run the tower now say this: it's important to keep the current tilt due to the vital role that this element played in promoting the tourism industry of Pisa. That's what I want you to do. I want you to keep the current tilt, and I want you to help others to keep that tilt as well. The next time you're tempted to hide what's different about you, remember that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. The next time you're tempted to criticize someone else for being different, remember that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. Heroes are freaks. Heroes stick out when everyone else fits in. Heroes see strength where everyone else sees weakness. Thank you very much.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.